Hi there, fiber friends. I am Sarah. This is my yarn lab, and welcome to episode or yarn number 3 of my 23 yarn spins in 2023. So if you watched last episode, and I will link that up here, then you'll know that I spun a 3-ply BFL sock yarn. I started this over a year ago, intending to participate in Andrea Mowry's hand-spun socks knit along, and obviously that didn't happen, but I persevered and finished off this 3-ply yarn to knit some hand-spun socks. However, I don't have quite the yardage I was hoping for a completed pair of socks. So this episode is going to be showing you how I'm going about producing a contrasting color for heels, toes, and cuffs. Upon finishing filming the last episode, I actually grabbed my camera and dove straight into my fiber stash to pick out fibers for the contrasting color that would correspond or match nicely with this braid here. So I'll show you that bit of footage right away. All right, this is the yarn from last week. So like I said, I have just under 200 yards. I need about 250 for a comfortable pair of socks for myself. So I need to spin a contrast for heels, toes, and cuffs, since I don't have any more of this fiber to spin matching additional yardage. This is, believe, a 100% BFL fiber that I dyed myself. So I'm just rooting around in one of my stash bins here, and what I pulled out is some undyed oatmeal colored BFL. The color comes from the sheep, not from any dye. And I grabbed a collection of silk hankies that I think pick up, sorry, we'll move this over here, that from my perspective pick up on the colors in my yarn here. We've got some of that green, some of that red. The purple's not really in it, but I think that it goes. This color certainly matches in here, and that lighter one. But I think these silk hankies blended with this little bit of BFL should make, I mean, I could put a bit more red in, but it's not really dark enough. You know what, maybe we'll put that red in too. Should make for it. This one here also kind of matches. So let's take all this fiber here over to my wheel. And I know that these look really bright in comparison to this braid, but I promise you that they'll muddy down when they get mixed together on my drum carder. So let's do that. Hopefully that wasn't too frantic or shaky cam. I was just sort of right in that moment of excitement, having identified that I had a new spin that I needed to quickly put together. But we'll go right over to my drum carder now, and I'll show you how I took that BFL fiber and those silk hankies and produced a bat to spin my contrasting color with. All right, so I've got my drum carder here. It is, where's it going to say on it? It is an older Louette one that I purchased secondhand. And let's just untangle some fiber and start loading it up. And I'm going a little bit quick right now because 1, that is just how I tend to do things. 2, Marshall's going to wake up from his nap at any second and put an end to this. And 3, you gotta strike while the iron is hot, creativity-wise. So there's a little bit of the undyed. Some of the red BFL. Some of the green. And the silk now. I may need to snip these since silk tends to be, yeah. Gonna need to cut these with scissors. So I'm just gonna open up the hanky like that and cut it a couple times with some scissors. Let's see how that goes. And we'll do that with each of my colors of the silk hankies. So just sort of opening them up a little bit, and then I will cut them with scissors. And that's just because otherwise the fiber lengths in the silk will be too long relative to the BFL. Green, some of the red. And put some more of the silk on. And then more wool. Last minute addition, let's add a little bit of black in to this mix. To really sort of deepen the whole thing. Alrighty, so that's loaded on once. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the bat off, and then I will run it through a second time to blend everything a bit more. You can see those long silk fibers. That's what's kind of making this not come off clean. I'm just using a knitting needle to pull the fiber off. This drum carder didn't come with one of those hooks that people use to open up their bats. Okay, there we go. Got it started. Let's pull it all down here. Then we can work it off of the drum. Grab some of the fiber that's sticking behind. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And compare it to the original yarn here, and you can see that we're in the same color family. It's definitely going to be a contrast, but it will go with. I'm just going to rip this into a couple strips and feed it onto the drum a second time. So I've ripped it into strips and I'm going to feed it onto the drum rotated sort of 90 degrees, so it'll feed on this way. That's going to help blend everything even more. And I might actually see if it'll feed in from the bottom here. Yeah. It's because I don't have a brush on here. It doesn't pick up very well when I feed it in from the bottom. I find that entirely too much fiber likes to get caught up on this first wheel when I do it this way. But let's go ahead and paint on the rest then. Alright, so that's fed on a second time, and you can see it's definitely more blended now than it was before. And let's go ahead and pull this off my drum carder. And there we have the fiber in this bat. Probably not going to blend it a third time. We'll spin it up and see how it looks for a contrast color for my heels, toes, and cuffs for that sock yarn. So I pulled that bat directly off my drum carder and stripped it down into 3 equal-ish strips right away. And here is one of them. And you can see that I added in that black, likely merino, possibly Corriedale fiber, just to tone things down and, you know, add a deeper value to this fiber. And I couldn't help myself, before even grabbing my camera to film, I went ahead and spun off 2/3 of it. Here's one bobbin, the other one is still actually attached to my wheel, into the singles. And you can see that these two colors certainly look like they're a lighter and a darker version of the same yarn in the same family. So I'll take this over to my wheel now. I'll bring my camera this time and we can chat for a little bit whilst I spin the 3rd single for a 3-ply contrast color for the heels, toes, and cuffs of this sock spin. Alrighty, let's sit down here. I've got my wheel, got my new bobbin on, get my leader, and I don't know if this is sacrilege or not, but my leader is some Red Heart Super Saver 100% acrylic yarn, which seems like it's should be illegal to spin beautiful natural fibers onto a leader made of acrylic yarn, but it works. So we're going to get my flyer going I'm going to need to adjust my tension, make sure I've got some uptake here. Not too much. When you spin fine, you want to get lots of twist into your singles before allowing those fibers to come onto the bobbin. And so I've got my uptake, my tension, if you will, actually quite low. And that's going to allow enough twist to incorporate, into my fiber before I let it draw onto my bobbin. And that's where the integrity of a fine spun single comes from, is in lots of twist. All right, so you'll see I'm just struggling a little. What I will show you real quick, and hopefully this is well in frame, is the way that that silk blended in. You'll remember in the bit of the video where I showed you how I carded this bat, I chopped my silk down to get a shorter staple, if you will, length of silk. That's because you want all the fibers in a blend to be relatively the same staple length. You're going to get the easiest drafting that way. And what's happening is when the silk catches, it's pulling a long silk fiber from deep in this fiber into the yarn, which makes it a little bit tricky to spin. So to make things easier for myself, what I did with the other two bobbins is I pre-drafted, to some extent, my bat, my strip of my bat, because it's much easier to spin fine and spin consistent if you're spinning from a smaller amount of fiber in your hand. So I didn't pre-draft the whole thing. I sort of pre-draft out a length, spin it up, and then pre-draft out the next length. And that helps with some of that inconsistency of the silk and the wool blending together. And it also, in general, makes for a much easier spin of a fine yarn, is to pre-draft like that. So just using a short forward draft, lots of twist, low tension, low uptake, and away we go. And aiming for a consistently fine, lighter than a lace weight single. Spinning fine with a short draft like this, for me, is always a challenge of my own patience, since I like to run on my spinning wheel and want the sort of instant gratification that comes by spinning fast and with my more default sort of longer woolen style backdraft. Because this fiber is a carded bat and not a combed preparation, what I'm going to get, despite using a worsted short forward draft, is a worsted woolen sort of blend of a yarn. Because like I said, have said in my past videos about spinning, the preparation of my fiber is going to determine more, in my opinion, than anything else, the style of my final yarn. So, I am still spinning not from the fold, and so, to some extent the fibers are entering into the single in a parallel worsted manner, but the very nature of carding fiber, it really does incorporate a lot of air into the fiber. It really gives you a less condensed, less nicely aligned product compared to combing fiber, and also compared to pulling your fiber off of the carder with a diz. You could pull a sliver off. You could pull sort of like a diz roving off, and that process of forcing the fiber through the diz will align things further and lend you more in the worsted direction. Anyways, that's my ramble for today on worsted and woolen and fiber prep. But as you can see, I've got a long spin ahead of me to spin off this bit of fiber for the third single of my sock spin for the heels, toes, and cuffs now. And I will probably not bore you by just yammering at you for hours at end while I spin this off. I will go ahead and spin it, and I will come back to you for me tomorrow, for you just in a moment, when I am ready to 3-ply my singles together. Alrighty, I finished plying off my 3-ply, those singles there. Just pop my flyer off and grab my bobbin to show you. Just taking a look at it on the bobbin, it really does look like a harmonious sort of blend of colors. And then showing you what I've got left on my 3 bobbins with the singles. I was pretty evenly distributed for this yarn. I think I've got maybe, well, I've got a tangle is what I've got, but 2 bobbins basically emptied out at almost exactly the same time. And I've got just a teeny bit of singles left on that 3rd one. It wasn't enough to warrant trying to incorporate into that yarn. So yeah, I divided my fiber and spun fairly consistently. I don't love having a ton of leftover singles at the end of a project, but that's not an amount that I'm too worried about. And I will go ahead and wind this off onto my nitty knotty now, so that I can finish this yarn. I won't probably take any footage of finishing it. I'm going to do it the exact same way that I finished the yarn on the first video. So if you look at my sit and spin episode 1 for this year, you'll see that I did a very hard finish with soapy hot water and cold water, moving that yarn with a lot of agitation back and forth between the two, and then giving it a real good thwack afterwards. And that kind of lightly felts the fibers within the strands of the yarn to give you sort of a more uniform held together yarn. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And when you see me next in this video, I should be casting on to see how this works out for socks. So I've got my yarn 2 finished. Like I said, I finished it fairly hard in order to sort of lightly felt those fibers into unison within the yarn. And I have 88 yards of my contrast color to go with my 190 yards of my initial yarn. The 2 of them, I think, hopefully that's focusing all right, look absolutely great together. So I'm gonna wind these up into cakes and cast them on. I'm going to do a top-down sock, as is my favorite, possibly in ribbing, and I will get back to you once I've knit a little bit into my sock. So I've got those yarns caked up and cast on, and I am nearly done the foot, almost ready for the toe of my first sock. I decided that my yarn was approximating a DK weight yarn, and so I cast on using 3mm needles, and I cast 48 stitches for me. Actually, I cast 56, tried it on and found it was going to be too wide, so I ripped my cuff back and tried again. And I did, like I said, the contrasting cuff, I believe 10 rounds, 30 rounds, heel flap and gusset. Those decreases are done. Switch to stockinette for the foot, and we are moving along nicely. I should be right around the halfway point of this ball by the time I get to the toe, and pop the toe on with the contrast color. And so overall, I am really happy and pleased with how amazing these yarns are knitting up so far. And I'll make sure that when I finish this pair of socks, I do a bit of a review on this spin, and I'll add it up here on YouTube as its own video, and I will link to it at the end of this one when that happens. So yeah, that's it for yarn number 2 and 3 of my 23 yarns in 2023. I think next I might want to spin something like a comforting default yarn that I could use maybe in a colorwork project or something. But that's just an idea for now. If you want to see what yarn number 4 for 2023 will be, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. If you don't want to miss out on any of my updates, ring that bell for notifications. And thanks so much for joining in with me today. Until I see you next time, happy spinning and bye for now.